So where are you based?
I'm at the new school.
Down, so you're based in New
city,
York, in the Manhattan?
In Brooklyn now.
Oh, you in Brooklyn?
The school, you know, is in
Yeah, right at the bottom, yeah.
Are you around?
Good afternoon. It's high noon at the Brooklyn Literary Festival, Book Festival. It's high noon here at the Brooklyn Law School. And today we're opening with a discussion of Nelson Mandela, who we'll talk to you more about in a minute, and also to engage your ideas and thoughts about one of the people who was referred to certainly as one of the greatest men of his age and of his time. My name is Danny Schechter. I'm known as the News Dissector. I'm the author of a book, Madiba A to Z. I did, as a television documentary filmmaker, I made 6 films with Nelson Mandela, including a film that was showcased his visit to Brooklyn in 1990 when he came out of JFK into Brooklyn, the boys, what was then Boys and Girls High, to incredible response and reception from the streets, from every kid in town, from mass welcome of the kind he was unprepared for. So, I've been following the story for many, many years, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. First of all, before we begin the program, I'd like to let you know that books by authors in this program can be purchased from Books on Call NYC downstairs, just outside the entrance to the building. Immediately following this program, authors will be signing at that location as well. So you're in for a treat today because you have with you some people who have spent a great deal of time writing about and living this story. It's not just a story that people wrote about academically, but it's a story that engaged their lives and times. And it's a story that changed everybody who came close to it, I think it would be safe to say. Changed their sense of possibilities, their sense of humanity, their sense of the way in which people can struggle for justice and at least for a time prevail. I wouldn't say that everybody achieved everything they fought for, but they certainly achieved so much more than they expected when they started. It took a really long time. The ANC itself just marked its 100th anniversary, the oldest liberation movement in all of Africa. So the fact that this actually even happened was still something that people told me about, including Joe Slovo. We have the author of a biography of Joe Slovo and Ruth First. He told me, I still have to pinch myself. I still have to pinch myself to believe that this happened. So we're here to talk not just about Mandela, known as Madiba in South Africa, known as Tata, as grandfather, as the father of his nation, but also anybody who interacted with him. And this is what's remarkable. Anyone who interacted with him was so touched by it because they brought to it such expectations that they looked up at him with such awe. At the same time, to the surprise of many people who met him, he remembered you. He actually remembered you. I was at an event at Rockefeller's, at the Radio City Rainbow Room. He was coming to New York, and he walked into the room. There was security on top of security, laced with security, cops, feds, and anything you can imagine waiting for him. We were in our little media area to try to film this non-event. And Mandela walked into the room, looked around, saw me, walked over to me, and said to me, "Do you remember me?" Okay, which was, I said, well, I think so. Kind of amazing, but it was something that a lot of people later testified to. We only have 50 minutes to talk about a life that went on for 95 years and a mystique and a myth in a way that's continuing to this moment. Nelson Mandela was sort of, they said after Coca-Cola, the best known brand in the world. So he was known by everyone, loved by almost everyone, at least later when it became fashionable to love him. At one point, he was, of course, detested, feared as a terrorist and worse, and actually turned in part of a history that doesn't get much play in the New York Times or anywhere else, by the CIA, who was tracking his movements and turned him over to the South African police, which brings the current issue of surveillance that we're all concerned about very much into focus, except the year was 1962, not today. So this is a story, a long story, a story with lots of ups and downs, but also a story of triumph that we really need to study and examine and understand, not only, for what it meant to South Africa, but what it meant to us. And I think that's the part of what we'll be exploring today, is why did this man from the rural backwaters of Kunu in a rural area of South Africa have the effect that he had on Americans and people all over the world who were not only touched but driven and inspired by his example. And, that hasn't ended with his death, which came about in last December, and we should remember came about because originally he contracted pneumonia in prison. So he was a casualty of apartheid, even as he was a victor over apartheid, and that was quite incredible. So we have an amazing panel here today, and I'm going to get right to it. I wanted to start with our not now visiting, but living in New York, South African, Sean Jacobs. He's on the faculty of the New School. He's a native of Cape Town, South Africa. He has a PhD in politics from the University of London, an MA in political science from Northwestern University, and a doctorate from the College of Hard Knocks in the struggle in South Africa. He's writing a book now on the intersection of mass media, globalization, and liberal democracy in post-apartheid South Africa. Sean, you've written not just about Mandela, but about how Mandela was regarded, idealized, and mythologized by the American media, including the recent movie, A Long Walk to Freedom, in which I worked. And I would just say, as a parting good little shot, the last courtroom I was in was a courtroom that was built by the movie to resemble, to every detail, the court house in which the Ravonia trial took place, and in which he was convicted and sent to prison for life. And that's a story in itself told in the movie. Anyway, Sean, take it on. By the way, I just want to quickly introduce, having a little competition from the masses here, the midget masses. Alan Widener, who's here, who wrote a brilliant biography of Ruth First and Joe Slovo, two of Mandela's closest comrades, testifies to the fact that Mandela did not do this alone, and Mandela was part of a movement and was never claimed credit as the liberator of South Africa. And to my immediate left, a woman that I have worked with and learned so much from, the legendary, if you will, Charlayne Hunter-Gault, who grew up, I learned in her biography, let's give her a hand. I didn't know this. She was born in Due West, South Carolina. Due West, South Carolina. And she was one of the two students that desegregated the University of Georgia, from which she graduated in 1963. She's been a journalist among journalists, a heroine and a shero in the civil rights movement in America, but also at a point in her life decided to do what very few American journalists who were interested in the South Africa story did. She moved to South Africa and moved to live there and to work there for NPR, for CNN. And, as someone who is probably one of the most knowledgeable journalists about South Africa, and in her article in the New Yorker about Mandela, so the last little piece of introduction here, because we're going to move rapidly, she told him, I was